Voilà. Goedenavond, bonsoir, goedenavond. I'm very happy to welcome here today the new Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Luc Schoof. It is a great pleasure for us and to welcome him on his second week in office, but even more so that Prime Minister Schoof decided to do his first bilateral trip to the Benelux countries, to Belgium and to Luxembourg. And that is something which we appreciate very much because it shows that for the new Dutch government, the relationship with Benelux partners and with Luxembourg remains very important. It is important for us as a Luxembourg government, and therefore I want to thank you very much for your visit here today. We have always had, as Luxembourg, very strong and good relations with the Netherlands. You know that in the countries around the world where Luxembourg does not have an embassy, based on an old treaty, it is the Dutch who represent Luxembourg interests. We have had close relations between our royal families, and indeed they are cousins, and the Dutch king at some time was also in personal union Grand Duke of Luxembourg. But also today, you know, we have a big Dutch community in Luxembourg, and some of you know my wife is Dutch, so but there are also quite a number of Luxembourgers living and studying in the Netherlands. Our companies work together, and so we have every interest in building our future also together. I appreciate that we had today a very frank, open and instructive exchange of views. It was very enriching. And I can assure you, Mr. Prime Minister, dear Dick, that we will do everything to make sure that the good relationship between our two countries and our governments will continue in the future. We exchanged on European topics. Luxembourg believes very strongly in a competitive Europe, in a Europe where the single market is deepened. I think that is extremely important for my country, and I would dare to say also for the Netherlands, because we have economies that work cross-border, so we exchange on how we can further build the single European market to the benefit of our citizens and our companies. We talked about Ukraine, where we believe that it is very important to continue to support Ukraine, because what is at stake there are fundamental principles, fundamental values in which we believe in Europe, so that borders cannot be changed by force. We believe that we need to make sure that Europe has a voice in the world, and obviously the difficult situation in the United States, where we strongly condemn the attack on the presidential candidate Donald Trump 2 days ago, are elements that show us that Ukraine, this political violence that we strongly condemn, all these are elements where we as European countries also have to stand side by side and exchange on those views, so that also in the future the fundamental values of Europe, which are the cornerstone of European integration, can also be preserved. So we will continue to work together on economic and political issues. We will remain strong partners in Benelux and in the European Union, and we hope that also on issues which we discussed this afternoon, like cooperation in renewable energy, we can find ways to do even more together in the future. So I think there's ample room for us to work together. This is only the beginning. It's the first visit to Luxembourg, and I hope, dear Dick, that it will not be the last one. But we had the opportunity also to briefly exchange views in the margins of the NATO summit in Washington. And I think I'm hopeful that with the new government, which is a broad coalition of many parties in the Netherlands, we will find areas of cooperation, but also in the Benelux. So thank you for being there, and I give you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister Frieden. Thank you, Luc, for kind words of introduction and a warm welcome here in Luxembourg. And I can assure you, this was not my last visit to Luxembourg as a Prime Minister. I appreciate being able to meet so soon after the new Dutch government took office. Early today, I was in Brussels for consultations with our colleague Alexander De Croo. And our countries' histories are closely intertwined, and our ties have been very close for many years, bilaterally, in the Benelux and within the EU. So it makes perfect sense, as you already mentioned, that my first bilateral meeting should be with my Benelux counterparts. In just under 2 months, we will celebrate 80 years of the Benelux. Since 1944, it has been a pioneer of cross-border cooperation within Europe. We are together without borders, which is, as it should be, between good neighbors. Coming together informally where possible and at high level where necessary. The milestone we reached last year is a good example, the new Benelux Treaty on Police Cooperation, which came into force in October. It makes it easy for us to work side by side, including on each other's territories, in the fight against the organized crime that seeks to take advantage of our open societies. And there are several more themes on which we cooperate, such as infrastructure in the context of energy transition. You already mentioned it. The hydrogen network is being developed to connect the port of Rotterdam with the rest of Northwest Europe, branching out first, of course, into Luxembourg and Belgium. I look forward to working together to carry forward these plans. There are many opportunities for our countries that can deliver green growth and the jobs of the future. Last week, I met a great many new colleagues, including you, Luc, and Alexander, at the NATO summit in Washington. And it's important that, and one thing became very clear to me, that the Netherlands is greatly valued as a reliable and constructive ally, both within the Benelux, within NATO and in Europe, especially on those issues where the EU has an important role to play, and with which the new European Commission will soon be pressing ahead. Boosting Europe's competitiveness, continue our support for Ukraine, and expanding Europe's defense industry, to name just 3 of Europe's priorities. At the same time, the Dutch government will identify specific focus points on its own, so that we can achieve the aims set out in our framework coalition agreement. These are aims which also resonate in other member states, like reducing irregular migration and securing a better future for farmers. It was good to talk to each other today for the first time about all these topics. They will undoubtedly be back on the European agenda in the period ahead. Of course, today we also reflected on the shocking events that took place in the US this weekend. It's a relief that former President and Republican candidate Mr. Trump survived the attack. We wish him, his family, and the American people all the best. Our thoughts are with the victims of the attack and their loved ones. Let me be clear, democracy is something we uphold together, and democracy is stronger than violence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, and now open for questions.
Moyenne, Premier Ministre. Goedenavond, Premier. First question is on the Benelux. After today, for you to both leaders, do you see new common ground for new cooperation inside the Benelux Union? And the second question, if I may, is on what Prime Minister Orbán is doing. Today he was presenting a so-called peace plan. And we see now more member states are boycotting informal summits during the Hungarian presidency. So last week, the one from trade ministers, and in late August, there is an informal summit for ministers of foreign affairs. And I would like to know, are you both joining the boycott? Thank you.
So if I may start, I'm soon the Dean of the Benelux Prime Ministers, yes. Because I started only 8 months ago, but Mark Rutte, as you know, just left. Alexander De Croo will most probably have to leave in a few weeks from now. So I will soon assume the senior role in Benelux, but also Luxembourg will have the presidency of the Benelux in 2025. I think that the Benelux is a unique laboratorium of European ideas. It was so when the borders were abolished. That doesn't mean that you always have to agree on everything in Benelux. But in a Europe of 27, I think it's very good that you have sometimes some countries that are geographically close to each other, that have close economic and historical ties, that they discuss issues together. We both talked about, for instance, hydrogen, renewable energy. These are areas where you can work together. And moreover, I think it's very good, and we agreed to do that we will also continue to coordinate our views or discuss about our respective views prior to the European Council. So I believe that Benelux is a useful tool to coordinate, to exchange views, and sometimes to go even further in European cooperation. But obviously that needs to be discussed on the various topics with the new colleagues that I now have. And therefore, again, thank you for having come to Luxembourg and to Brussels today. I can't speak for the Belgians, but I mean, it is the same spirit, and I think that's very positive. Again, you may not need to agree on everything, but at least to coordinate is very useful, and I obviously have to discover more about the content of the two governments that are in the process. One has just been formed, and the Belgian one is in the process of being formed. So that will depend very much on the content, on where we can go. On the Hungarian presidency, let me say that Prime Minister Orbán did not have any mandate on behalf of the European Union to travel neither to Kyiv, nor to Moscow, nor to Beijing, but it is the right of every Prime Minister to travel to the places he thinks that it's opportune to travel. But it's a difference whether you speak on behalf of the European Union or not. He made it clear that he had no mandate from the European Union, and the European Union made it even more clear that the rotating presidency has no right to represent the European Union on external affairs. On boycotting the informal meetings on the Hungarian presidency, my position and the position of the Luxembourg government is that boycotting is never the right thing to do. It's much better that you talk to other people, and I think that you should talk also to people with whom you disagree. We both talked about this terrible attack on presidential candidate Donald Trump in the US. That is the result of, if people use violence to discuss with each other, or if they don't talk to each other, I think both are the wrong ways to move forward in democracy. In a democracy, people choose their leaders. In democracy, people talk to each other. And since I became Prime Minister, I insisted so much on unity and on respectful discussion with people who have other ideas. The democracy is rich if different ideas are expressed. Obviously, then in democracy, a majority needs to decide, respecting the minority, respecting the opposition. And I think our voice is better heard if we go to Hungary, if we talk to the Hungarians, if we make our values, our voices heard. And by the way, you do not only go to Hungary to meet the presidency, you go there to meet the 26 others as well. And therefore, we will not boycott these informal ministerial meetings.
My shortest answer could be, I just echo the Prime Minister of Luxembourg. But to say a few things about it. First, the Benelux. After 80 years, I mentioned in my statement, my impression of the Benelux, and I had some experience with the Benelux before in my previous positions, is still alive and kicking, to put it that way. And I think it's also important that the Benelux, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands together, when we really stick together, we are a powerhouse also in Europe, but also on trade, on economy, on a lot of things. And I think that's a worthwhile addition to all the other international relationships we have. But it's very special because it's 80 years old and we should therefore cherish it. And I certainly believe it has a future, and I'm looking forward for the presidency that Luxembourg is taking in 2025. And I hope that I will be able to visit here. This probably my third or something like that. But we'll see. So that's for the Benelux. In regard to Mr. Orban and Hungary, it's just like the Prime Minister just said. It was made very clear to Orban that he didn't speak on behalf of the European Union. I think that is the most important statement we could make. And bilateral, every country can do whatever it suits him or her. And at the same time, we should have talks. And we will look together with all our member states on a case-by-case basis how we would react and how we would proceed. As far as the Dutch are concerned, there's no formal blockade on any meeting.
Any other question?
It was a Dutch question, wasn't it?
Mr. Schoof, Eric Ewald from Radio 100.7 here in Luxembourg. I just wanted to know, in the context of the Benelux, which will be your central vision for the Benelux for the next years? What will you emphasize on? Will it be especially the topic of illegal immigration?
I think there are several topics, and we should also look into some specifics of the Benelux. So, of course, the agreement of the Dutch government focuses very much on lessening irregular migration and also more perspective for farmers. And I think that also in the Benelux, we could very well work on that together. So that's important. But as I mentioned just in my statement, for example, the police cooperation in relation to the fight to organized crime is something that is very specific, also within the Benelux context. So there are different kinds of topics we work on. But if you would ask what is the main topic for the Dutch government, irregular migration and perspective for the farmers are two key issues for us in relation to all our EU members, but also in the Benelux. But as I said, there are other topics as well.
Last question, if there is any. Okay. Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure being here. Thank you, Luc. Great.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you again. Yeah.